Hello, everyone. How are you doing today? I hope you are doing very well. Thank you very much for joining us for today's local search clinic. And today's topic is local search at scale. And we have the one, the only, the maestro himself, Ben Fisher, with us. So we've got about a minute until we officially start. So why don't we use that space to explore a bit of Ben's background and why he's so well qualified for talking to us today. And while we're doing that, we can also use this as a kind of audio and sort of video check for everyone listening in. So if you can't hear us, you can't see us, or something is going awry, let us know while Ben is telling us all about his experience. Ben, over to you.
Right on. Thanks for having me, Miles. It's been a little bit since we've done a webinar together, my friend. So thanks for having me. So for those of you out there, hi, Laura. So for those of you out there who haven't met me or seen me before, or hear me talk about kind of background, I've been in this space, basically local SEO before it was local SEO. So I've got about 30 years experience under my belt. Working with everything from local businesses to enterprises. Some of my largest clients at my previous agencies that I owned were people like, for instance, GoDaddy. HostMonster, household names nowadays. And that was from the enterprise side. And, for now, I think I've been working in the local space, really hyper local for, going on at least around 12, 13 years, something like that. I am one of the founders of Steady Demand. Steady Demand, we are a local SEO agency. When it comes to working with enterprises and franchises, we do a lot of work on, say, reinstatements, which come from suspensions. We also do like suspension mitigation and also protection of profiles. It's extremely important when you're dealing with enterprises, especially franchises that go rogue. On that topic, we work on organization compliance, which is very important. Most Zs don't have, a lot of control over their Azores don't have a lot of control over their Zs. And so we help with compliance and organizing those paperwork, etc. And then there's the Z expansion. So expanding your business, your footprint, basically in your geographic area, setting up new locations, but again, in compliance with Google My Business or Google Business Profile, business model approval, and then finally, shockingly, bulk verification. So many franchises and enterprises are actually not bulk verified, which I find amazingly crazy, but it's true. And last part is that I am what's called a Google Business Profile Diamond Product Expert. Basically, that just means that when you're talking with me, you're pretty much as close as getting to talking to Google as possible. All of us product experts that are, like a gold designation and higher, we all are under NDA with Google. We work together with the Google Business Profile team. The product managers get to impact the product itself, but really the cool part is we get to get very, very direct answers from Google. So that's enough about me.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you very much. That's incredibly kind of detailed, and you are extremely kind of qualified to talk about this. Just for everyone's sake, if you haven't participated in one of our local search clinics before, this is basically just a straight Q&A. These are your questions asked by me to Ben, and then Ben will share his expertise and any kind of insights that he's able to do that don't cross the boundaries of his NDA with Google, or hopefully maybe blurs the edges a little bit to kind of make sure that we have all the kind of juicy insights that help you out. So if you've got a question, put it in the Ask a Question module, which is in the sort of bottom of your kind of screen. There are 19 questions already there. You can also upvote existing questions. So have a look through them, see which ones you like the look of, that you want to kind of hear Ben answer as well. The more upvotes they get, the more they kind of rise to the top. And I will basically just be kind of picking off the top. Now, when we, as of yesterday, we didn't actually have any questions from the audience in advance. So we have put some of our own in there. Actually got our enterprise team who work with enterprise clients said, what are the questions that you would want to ask Ben? And also, what are the questions that our enterprise clients ask you? The most common questions that we can feed into Ben. So we've done some seeding in there, a bit of a cheat, basically, because this is really an opportunity for you to put your questions to Ben, but I wanted to kind of get the ball rolling. So add your questions to the Ask a Question, please upvote them, and we're going to blast through the next 57 minutes and cover as many of them as possible. It's going to be a bit breathless. Ben's going to be exhausted, but hopefully you're all going to walk away with a much deeper and broader understanding of how to help businesses with have more than one location, ideally lots of locations, in Google Business Profile, but also in the wider murky world of local SEO. So Ben, I'm going to dive straight into questions. As if it's a complete fix, one of the first questions comes from us. So question is, are Google posts becoming more or less impactful in boosting the prominence of a GBP listing? And is there a way of doing bulk Google posting for all stores at once?
Okay, so the basics behind Google Posts goes something like this. Back in the day when they first came out, there was a little bit of what's considered a semantic relationship between ranking and GPP profiles. This doesn't really exist anymore. Enough studies have been done. I believe Mike Blumenthal and I did the first study, which was back about I forget how many years ago it was now, like 6 years ago. And then Joy Hawkins recently did a study, and it pretty much proved through a small sample set that the effects on ranking are not there. However, that being said, there's not a reason to not do posts. Posts are great from a conversion standpoint, from an education standpoint, and they also show up as a justification basically in search as well. So I highly recommend doing them. It's a great way to convey information about a location. As far as, is there a way to do them in bulk? Of course, there's ways to do it in bulk. There's a lot of different apps. As a matter of fact, I believe, Miles, some BrightLocal support doing posts. I forget.
Very soon we will be, yes. And with
the
scale feature being a piece of that.
Excellent. So my recommendation is that Google likes original content. They will not penalize you for replicating content across multiple locations. However, they do kind of give you a little bit of an engagement bonus if you are making the content original and at least 30 to 40% original is what you would ask you to strive for. It's difficult when you're doing it at scale. Because now you have to deal with getting pictures, basically, from your local merchants, and you also have to get local information from your locations. So that can be a little bit of a challenge. Content always is, but I would say try to be as unique as possible.
Okay, so there's no penalty in replication, but Correct. You think Google looks more favorably upon you if it's unique. And what does that favorability mean? You think a ranking bump or?
No, again, not a ranking bump. Not a ranking bump. I would think about it more from the engagement signal bump. But really what they're geared towards is they're geared towards helping get you a little bit more, I don't want to say the word visibility because it's not accurate. It's really better for conversions is all I can really say. And I can only tell you this because I've had conversations with the product team and about posts specifically, and they've explicitly told me that they prefer internally to have as much unique content as possible.
Okay, so I guess then it becomes probably a balancing act between the extra effort it takes to post unique content across X locations, X hundred locations potentially, with the consideration that it might get you some extra boost, but it's hard to necessarily kind of quantify that. So then it becomes a time resource versus this potential unknown sort of uplift.
So the problem here is I kind of go into this in my series, is that internally at any kind of like in the enterprise level, when you have somebody who is running the GPPs, they have to basically quantify to somebody up higher in the chain, like a CFO, for instance. If I spend X amount in resources to create posts for 1,000 locations, how much new business or football is this going to drive? And unfortunately, the answer there is I don't know. I really don't. All I know is Google likes it. So it's one of the extreme challenges I think that a marketing manager has in larger organizations.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Ben. Let's move on from that one. The next question is, what do you determine to be the most important metrics to report to company stakeholders when it comes to showing the performance of across multiple locations? When you're reporting back to your franchise head offices, what metrics do you think that has the most impact with them?
Well, they always look at ranking, of course, still, right? Can't get people off of this. So they're going to take a look at ranking, but realistically, this is the trouble. with a large organization. I have a very large automotive chain that we work with. It's about 3,000 locations, something like that. And they were trying to take a sample set of those in multiple markets, trying to find similar locations that had similar population density, etc., so they could go ahead and measure them. So what we had to do is we created what we call our in group and our out group. So the in group is where we were doing our testing. The out group was our basically was our test, right? So we were testing the two against each other. So if we did something over here, would it increase metrics, right? Now the metrics that we could use were very limited. We could use call tracking. So that was number one, and that was probably the leading indicator, by the way. Then we just had to basically parse out the GBP insights, which we all know are junk anyway. Actually, halfway through, we ditched GBP insights and went to the new performance data because it's actually more real-time data. So we started grabbing that and then charting that out over time. But the problem then comes into it is now you're looking at things like seasonality, you're looking at political events, all sorts of different type of local events, for instance, that can skew all of this data. So anyway, I guess my point here of all of this is that we only have certain points of data that we can use, because another issue is that the store transactions, for instance, that information usually is not shared with the digital marketing team. So we don't know we don't know at the end of the day what the footfall is. So since we can't access the data, all we have is basically the GBP data and the phone calls. So at the end of the day, that's what we ended up using. It proved what we needed it to prove. Let's just put it that way.
So you were essentially doing it as an A/B test, two comparable areas, rather than a pre and post, before and after test. When you haven't got the luxury or a client who's engaged enough to do a test of that kind of scale, what do you go with? What's your kind of like, this is the base level we need to prove the effectiveness?
The only thing you can go is with the GBP data. Again, it's at least from the Google Business Profile side. I mean, of course you can start digging into organic as well, because that there is definitely, of course, if you're doing local SEO holistically, there's going to be an organic effect. So you can look at that. You can look at traffic. You can look at form conversions, again, if they have form conversions. You can look at time spent on the page, etc. All those different qualifying signals. But again, you only have the data that you can work with. But I do think that if you can do some kind of A/B test, with locations that are very similar in multiple metros, then you can kind of prove more to the higher ups that, look, out of this subset, 100, in this subset 100, we saw an increase of 34% in phone calls after we started this type of campaign. If they can look at that, they understand, the CMO is going to understand right away, like, oh, wow, 30% increase in phone calls. We converted X amount of those into sales, X amount when they're converted into footfall. They can do that conversion on their side, I guess is the point.
Do you find that such an effective way to get a foot in the door with a large organization? Say, look, you've got 2,000 locations. Let's build up some trust with us by running an A/B test, and we can prove to you what we can do. So essentially, it's kind of like it's a lower risk step for them. They get some data they can justify before leaping in there and putting a lot of budget behind something that they can't really necessarily prove.
Absolutely. I've used that technique at least just a couple times working with some ZORs, and actually enterprises, more enterprises than ZORs. So, but because you have to prove your worth when you're working with an enterprise, because there is a lot at stake. Yeah. There's a ton at stake. I mean, from the low level, it's like you're looking at this person's job that you're working with. Their job is at stake. And then at the end of the day, you've got the locations and the location managers and the location owners. Their lives are at stake as well.
I've got another question around running the test. Yeah. Would you ideally, if you had to choose two sets of locations, would you want to choose, do you mind if it's urban, semi-urban, rural locations? Do you want their best locations or just an average set? I mean, I guess what would you typically want to do if you were like going to model this out?
Yeah, in the times that I've done it, I mean, basically what we looked at is like, for instance, we looked at 3 locations, I think, in Chicago, 2 in New York, a couple in LA, some in Texas. So we picked the larger kind of density populations, but then we went down to a couple cities where we chose some that were in low density populations. And what we tried is said, okay, so if we can section this off, again, it depends on how many locations they have, right? But if we can section it off, let's take a look at the north end of the city and the south end of the city, or the east and the west, whatever it is. And so you would have your in-group and your out-group, but they would be located close enough to each other that we could actually judge and see if there was some difference. So It doesn't answer your question specifically, but I would say higher density of population and then carving it up from there.
Okay, brilliant. Let's move on. I think we've given that enough airtime. Thank you. Next question, and we've got a few questions centered around this particular sort of topic point. It's to do with locations that are near to each other. So you've got stores in a few streets apart, for example, and how you do this, how you stop them kind of competing within Google, but also how you differentiate them, let's say, on the website in terms of landing page content, so that again you're not creating kind of duplicate content, you're creating something that makes them stand out and be kind of clearly unique in Google's eyes. So it's 2 things. One is essentially with this whole topic of a density of stores and locations in a certain geographic area, that means they basically tread on each other's toes both on site and in GBP.
Yikes, what a question. So you take a look at somebody like McDonald's, right? McDonald's is going to have a storefront on every couple blocks, basically, right? It's like they're all over the place. Whereas you take a look at somebody like Walmart, and Walmart's going to have a couple strategic locations in a smaller metro area, right? How they make their decisions is one thing. How we make our decisions in GBP, I mean, it kind of follows, I guess, the same logic, but realistically, it's like, I don't think you can. I think to answer your question directly, I don't think you can control where visitors are going to go. So, yeah, there's not an elegant answer to the question.
I mean, in terms of getting Google, we focus on the GBP element. If you've got those stores in a similar area and someone who's doing a McDonald's near me or a burger restaurant near me, and you want each store to appear for when it's someone that's right outside, you don't want them going down the road or going 5 blocks across. So how do you what can you do to make sure that Google kind of gives equal sort of prominence and preference to the store, and then location just kicks in?
Yeah, there's not much you can do because it's really going to be all triggered based on location. So I mean, you've got your prominence and your relevance, of course, but realistically, when you're dealing with locations which are so close to each other, proximity is king. It is really going to be all location based. So, if I'm doing a search for, Italian restaurant near me, and, I'm looking at something like an Olive Garden, the closest Olive Garden is really what's going to show up for me. There's nothing you can do to GBP to really influence that.
Do you ever find, though, that you will have one dominant location in an area? And even if it's not the closest one, it's the one that seems to show up and trump others?
Yes. So there was a franchise I dealt with, and so they were bulk account verified, by the way. So which gave them a nice little small ranking boost. And yeah, they had locations which were literally within a couple blocks of each other in this one city, and their oldest location would rank the best, is really what it would come down to. However, sometimes when they would open up a new location, that one would rank very well too, but it usually ranked in position number 2 because they were so close to each other. So I think at that point, age actually was trumping more than anything else.
And is that because it's got the most authority? It's got the most prominence on the web? Is that just through being around for so much time?
Yeah, because the franchise had the relevance. They had the prominence because of basically, if we want to look at it from a simple level, from the age. And then, of course, location that you can't really fake. And they were close enough to each other to basically show a 3-pack, actually. So they had an ABC. Yeah. So all three were actually showing, which was nice.
Okay. All right. Let's move on because we've got a whole host of other topics. I'm just going to read this one. Comes from Mano. For a multi-location business offering same services across all locations, how do I make the location pages unique on the website so that, again, there's not much to tell them apart, but, how would you distinguish them?
So it's a difficult task, right? When you're creating content at scale. And realistically, the only thing that you can do is you can put yourself into the consumer's shoes. What does the consumer need to know about that area? And that's and also about the service for that area. And that's going to really be based upon the niche, the different type of industry that you're in. If you're, I hate this question, but
do you have a clear set of do's and don'ts? Maybe is there a clear thing of things you can do?
The do's is that they follow pretty much the same kind of landing pages that you create for a business that has the 3 locations. You're going to want to embed a map. You're going to want to highlight any kind of, again, depending on the industry, any kind of local attractions that are nearby, or local type of things that are nearby. They're, again, going to be very useful to the user. Your NAP information, of course, is going to be there. You're going to want to show reviews for that location. That actually is very important, I think, for multi-locations. Kind of builds that trust. And but beyond that, if you can, of course, manipulate the copy and make it at least 20 to 30% unique, depending on location page, then I think you're in a good place. Of course, when you're dealing with somebody who has 100 plus or 1,000 plus locations, it starts to become impractical. It's just not very easy. So what I would recommend doing is actually taking a look at, there's quite a few good franchises out there that do this stuff very well. But for the most part, they are templated pages.
Who would you say? You say that go and look at these guys. They've managed to get this right. Who do you put on that sort of pedestal?
There is this one franchise that I ran into a little while ago, and they're called Temperature Pro. And they have really awesome landing pages. They also have a great location finder as well.
Okay.
Another one that I like is Amco. Amco does a really good job too.
Yeah. By the way, everyone, Ben is writing a series all around local SEO at scale for kind of BrightLocal. The first blog post is already out, and he's doing some additional ones. Maybe we could consider doing a sort of teardown of what Temperature Pro and Amco do so well versus ones that don't. Maybe a kind of a good, too good, too bad sort of type scenario. Because those practical examples might actually be really valuable because, like I said, it's hard to really talk through what it is. But when you see good versus bad, it's clear what the advantages it could give you.
Yeah, so, that's actually quite possible, and I could reach out to them actually and have them share some of their experiences and positives and negatives.
Great, I should have more work for everyone. Brilliant. My job is done. Okay, so let's move on. Thank you, Ben. Next question comes from Henya. Thanks, Henya. It says, when claiming listings for a client for different facilities that they have acquired as they've been growing, we've been creating separate Google accounts to claim each one because we found that when you're claiming under one, we've got an account suspensions. But it's difficult to manage so many Google accounts on almost one-for-one sort of basis. So what can we do to claim multiple businesses under one account without getting suspended?
All right. So first, I'll get rid of a myth. You're looking at a correlation, not a causation. So claiming a acquired business into a Google account that has a lot of listings is not going to actually cause a suspension. So again, it's you might be seeing it, but that's actually not why it's occurring. Why it's not happening to you when you're doing it in a single account, that also doesn't make too much sense either. I mean, it's possible you have a bad user maybe, but what I would recommend is applying for the GBP agency dashboard. Inside of the agency dashboard, you can get control of locations a little bit easier through the invitation system, but also you can segment users very easily as well. So I would go ahead and apply for that and try it out. That way everything is under one account, but again, you can segment users very easily.
And what is the application sort of process and timeline? How long does it take to get approved? And
you can literally get approved sometime in 72 hours. So
Okay.
you just have to have an email address at your own domain name, and then you go and you apply on the form, and boom, you have an agency dashboard. The only requirement is when you're getting started is that the email address that you're using for the main account for the agency dashboard cannot have any GBP profiles associated with it whatsoever. So that's all. It just can't be a manager or owner of any GPP.
So it just has to function as a sort of as an agency that's sort of not connected to an existing one. So that's when you set it up on an entirely fresh email address that doesn't have any relationships to any GBP, and then you can start associating, claiming, becoming the manager of different GBP profiles.
Exactly.
I didn't realize, that was a key factor.
Absolutely. It was a big bugaboo when they first rolled out the agency dashboard. It was crazy.
Okay. And so you think when Henya is seeing her listings getting suspended, she's making the association because it's in this sort of larger account, but that's not the reason. There's something else that is also happening at the same time, and she's essentially connecting the wrong dots there.
Yeah, and to be fair, it's more than acceptable to connect those dots.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, as we know with suspensions, it's like Google doesn't tell you anything that's going on. You have to sit there and you guess or you troubleshoot. So, so it's very, very normal to think, oh, it must be because I have too many locations. Probably not.
Okay. This next question. Sorry, thank you, Ben. Next question comes from Adam. Love this question. This question has been asked for the last 12 years. I've been working in this industry. How do I appear in a map pack for multi-city services up to 80 miles apart without resorting to virtual offices?
Well, I'm glad you're not wanting to do virtual offices. That's good. So we were talking about expansion, right? Expanding your footprint. So I guess the first thing to say is that the average business is going to rank anywhere from 2 to 10 miles. That's pretty normal, right? I suggest using a tool like BrightLocal's grid ranking tool to look at where your ranking, where your ranking fall off is. Okay. So your ranking fall off is going to be that you'll see, like 1 where your rank for where your location is, and then you'll see, with 2s, 3s, 4s, 20s, right? Well, okay, so you want to go a little bit into that 20 area, and that's where you actually want to have another location. The short answer is that you're not going to rank 80 miles out without having a location, period. I don't care if you're a service area-based business or if you're a brick and mortar. So you only have a couple different options. One of those options is not virtual offices. Another one of those options is not using employees or contractors' homes. Trust me, you don't want to go down that road. There's too many pitfalls and suspensions. So your options really come down to just a couple of them. Number one is going to actually be, believe it or not, a co-working space, but there's a very specific way that it has to be set up to be inside of the guidelines. The next one is going to be cohabitation, and that is going to be finding a complementary business that you can basically share an office with, getting a unique address, being able to put up signage. All of that still applies, but it's going to cost you less. Another thing that I like to really highly recommend is that, like, for instance, if you're a storefront, you just don't know if you're going to get business from this area, this metro, right, when you first look at it. So try to find a month-to-month lease. It might cost you a little bit more for a month-to-month, but do that, set up your GBP, add call tracking, and then if you're getting enough phone calls that are coming in that offsets the capital expense of having that lease, then you can sign a long-term lease. That's not a problem. But at least you know if it's not working. So unfortunately, that's a long way of answering your question, is that you are going to need new locations if you want to rank out 80 miles. Alternatively, if you don't care about GBP, then set up location pages on your website, and then you might get some organic exposure that way.
Yeah. Interesting. Really, really get advice. I think there's no way to really shortcut this, but there are ways to test and learn, and make a small investment, and then kind of grow that to a big investment once you've proven that you actually get business from that area. Okay. Thank you, Adam. Okay, here comes another question. Historically, we've only ever worried about our business name, address, and phone number in our citation footprint, and having that match GBP. How much should we worry about website URL and opening hours matching GBP?
Opening hours you want to worry about, because GBP does a lot of scraping to verify data. Example, when you're setting up a new location, it is going to check your website for the name, address, and phone number, right? But it's also going to check the hours. So if it sees different information that's on your website versus what's in GBP, it's going to try and update GBP with usually something that's on your website, especially if that corroborates with any kind of somebody suggesting an edit to say that, okay, your hours are X, whereas, here, whereas they're Y there. So on your website, very important. On your citations, not so important unless they're really an authoritative site, LinkedIn, Yelp, BBB, things like that. Do you care too much about Facebook? Probably not, but again, I think that citations are important if the consumer is there. Otherwise, I don't worry about them too much.
So still the primary focus should be getting consistency across the NAP, having consistency with your working hours, website, GBP, absolutely crucial, and any other kind of top tier sort of third-party citation sites also really important. And where you can have consistency, but maybe don't sweat it on sort of smaller sites necessarily.
Yeah, exactly. I definitely don't sweat it. Unless there's a caveat to that actually, and I know in your citation tool you can find these very easily for people, but that is like local citations are really important when it comes to local SEO. Again, the bigger site, the big citations, the mid-level citations, who kind of cares about those? Google doesn't. But the local, super hyper local citations, those do matter. So if you're going out there and you're getting some citations like on a Chamber of Commerce website or some of the really, really well-known directory that's local, those you definitely want to get right.
Okay. Next question would probably take you about 2 weeks to answer. So I'm going to try and sort of narrow it down for you, but it has 7 upvotes, so I can't ignore it. It comes from Michael.
Okay.
Ask a question that's burning a hole in people's.
Let me guess. It's about
frustration. No, it's not actually. It's much broader than that.
No.
So basically, it's essentially the question is, what would you suggest for regular SEO activity, weekly or monthly, to drive high rankings for GBP for various targeted kind of keyword phrases? So what is
an easy answer?
Okay, fine. It's long. Okay.
Oh wait, keep going. Keep going.
No. If you think I was going to try and summarize it or phrase it, so give us your top 5 things that you think are absolutely regular, critical activities for any SEO worth their salt to be doing on a regular, weekly, monthly basis.
Yep. The only reason I say this is a short answer is because I get asked this question all the time. So I've been able to distill it down. Okay. So I'm going to lead off by giving you just a little bit of how the algorithm kind of works. So let's just look at it this way. Let's look at FISTs. These are the algorithms. You got your organic algorithm, your local algorithm. So the organic algorithm, as we know, 500 and some odd whatever plus signals. Okay, it's been around for ages, been redone multiple times. Organic algorithm is at the core. Then you have what's considered the local algorithm. Now, the local algorithm basically kind of sits on top of your organic algorithm. So whenever you are making changes or impacts that's going to impact you organically, it's going to impact your local presence at the same time. So why do I give that information first? Because the activities that you're going to do in organic are going to affect your GBP. Now, whatever you do in GBP, though, will not affect your organic. That's the only important thing to understand there. So what do you do? On a weekly basis, there's going to be things that you're going to be doing, or even there's not much you're going to do on a daily basis, but on a weekly basis, you're going to be doing things that are going to affect things in a kind of a more of a long-term type of situation. But you're also going to be looking at things that are going to help increase conversion, okay, versus ranking. So we'll touch on the GBP side first. There's not that many levers that you can pull in GBP that are going to affect ranking. They will affect conversions and also what's called engagement signals, which helps in a lot of different areas. So what do you want to be doing with GBP on a regular basis? Upload a picture, say 1 per week. Okay, it's hard to do at scale, but try it. 1 per week. No stock images. Try to go for local images if you can. Make sure they're not blurry. Make sure they're not racy. No logos on them, no phone numbers, no website URLs. Okay, so do posts. Do posts on a regular basis. 1 per week. You're gonna hear 1 per week a lot. So do a post once per week. Highlight a special, something going on in the local area, something going on the website, something like that. Again, same image rules apply. Questions and answers. If you're not getting a lot of active Q&A, try to update your Q&A with 1 to 2 per month, actually, if you can. I like to try and strive for 5. I think 5 is a nice number, but there's no science behind this. It's just kind of like nice. Beyond that, really what you want to do is if you don't have an automated system for this, is soliciting and getting reviews. If you're getting negative reviews, what I would recommend doing on a weekly basis or a monthly, again, depending on your business, but maybe on a monthly basis. If you're getting negative reviews, try reaching out to some old customers and asking them to update their review, even with 1 word or a picture. And that way their reviews will bubble up to the top and start to bury those negative reviews. So these are the things that you can do in GBP that are going to make a difference. Okay. Besides that, everything else is going to be long-term activities. So writing content that is helpful to a user, answering questions, not for SEO purposes, but good for me. What do I need to know to make a decision to buy from you or come to your location? Get this information, if you're working with multi-location, try to get the information from the store level. What are questions that people have? What are people buying? Things like that. Do blog posts. Again, and helpful, especially with this helpful content update. Even word count doesn't even matter these days, which is kind of cool. So doing that. Link acquisition. Try to get links from the local area, maybe by doing some kind of sponsorships, donations, things like that. These are long-term things. Getting links is not easy. So you might want to set it so once a week, you're looking for opportunities, you're doing some outreach, and maybe you're doing some follow-up, depending on what your schedule is and how many locations that you're working with. And then finally, using tools like BrightLocal, once a month, you run them through BrightLocal, see what's going on, what are the technical details of the page that need to be adjusted. Based on whatever criteria you feel is important, whatever is being surfaced in the tool. So use the audit. I've used it before. I think it's useful. So I think at the end of the day, that kind of covers the core type of SEO activities, and just break them up.
That's great. Thanks, Ben. Like I said, it's so it was an infinite amount of detail that you can kind of go into answering that. So I'm going to blast through a couple of what I think are likely to be quick questions. This one comes from Laura. Okay, this is basically dispel the myth or answer it. Is there any point in geotagging photos on GBP or post photos?
First of all, Laura, thank you for asking the question. No. Period. Doesn't work. Let's dispel this myth. Everybody scream it from the rooftops. Tell your peers, stop, please. You're beating yourself up. You're beating your head into the wall. No EXIF data, no geotagging does not work.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just followed the thread. Sounds like someone might not be able to hear me correctly, and I'm wondering whether anyone else is struggling to hear me. I do actually have a big separate microphone that should be picking things up. It's not using the mic in here. This question comes from Mick. I have 6 existing locations around. A couple of them are within a metro. One is right in the metro and is new, only has 25 reviews. Some existing competitors have 500 plus. How do I compete? How do I get that location to perform?
Buy reviews. I'm kidding. I'm joking. Don't buy reviews. So So basically, the leading theory on reviews is this, and I believe Mike Blumenthal started this years ago. And that is when you have a new location, when you get 10 reviews, you get kind of this ranking bump. When you get 100 reviews, you get this ranking bump. But after 100 reviews, kind of the bump actually starts to kind of go away, right? It's like they don't bonus you from a ranking standpoint when you go above this. At least that's the leading theory. There might be other tiers in there that we don't know about or that haven't been tested, I should say. So, so how do you compete with these guys? So when somebody has 500 reviews, it depends what kind of business they are. Like if they're a restaurant or something like that, yeah, you're going to see a lot of reviews. If they're a lawyer, they're going to have a lot of reviews, but most of them are going to probably be purchased. If you got HVAC, yes, you can get a lot of reviews. Plumbers, you can get a lot of reviews. Anyway, long story short is that you basically should strive to get more reviews, but you're not going to be able to game the system. And if they've been around for 15 years, 20 years, they're going to have more reviews. Again, if they've only been around a year and they've got that many reviews and they're in a kind of industry that doesn't get a lot of reviews that quickly, it's probably suspect. And you might even want to report them to Google. Just let Google know about it. And, if it looks unnatural, and let Google sort it out, basically. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the answer is just go ahead and get more reviews.
Okay, more reviews. Fair enough. But you think there's a diminishing returns is still the wisdom. But Richard Cooper in our chat says, actually, he disagrees. He's seen that kind of Google, he's not seen a kind of drop off in the impact of that.
Hey, I love disagreements. I say test, please.
We could test. That's a good mantra. We could spend a long time thrashing that one out. Okay, I'm just trying to kind of get out. What are your top recommendations for avoiding GBP suspensions?
Oh, I was just seeing the question that Brett asked. There's some interesting stuff around reviews that we could talk about. Okay, I'm sorry. The question was about suspensions.
Yeah, what causes suspensions and how do you avoid them?
Oh boy, there's a question. How much time do we have? 19 minutes.
I reckon. I would give 3 minutes on this.
I will try and distill this down very quickly. So suspensions occur mainly because there is misleading or fraudulent information, or Google is doing something which is called an integrity check. Basically, that means that they might trust you, they might trust the business, but they just want to check and see if you're still kind of real, in a sense, and complying with their guidelines. Because there's a lot of businesses who were set up years ago. I hear it all the time. I've been in business for 15 years, and this is the first time I've gotten suspended. I've got so many reviews, and I paid Google. How come I got suspended? Well, sometimes it's random, which leads me to leading cause number 1, false positive. Google, when they do things called sweeps and things like that, you can get caught up as a false positive. It's fine. It's okay. Well, and actually, it's not fine. It was okay. It sucks. Because like right now, you're offline for 22 days minimum. So that's number 1, I guess, one leading cause. Second cause is going to be is that somebody has redressed you.
Is there an indicator, Ben, of how do you know whether you might be a false positive, or do you just have to go through? You just have to apply to Google and have them review it.
Yeah, there's no indicators whatsoever. I'd say the only indicator is if you submit a reinstatement request with no information whatsoever except maybe signage, and you get reinstated right away, you're probably a false positive. So the second indicator second leading reason is that you have been reported. See this all the time. Legitimate businesses, even ones that we are under our reinstatement program, legitimate businesses, maybe they have a long business name or whatever the case may be, and somebody reports you and you get suspended. Okay, so again, no indicators about this. You could sue Google and subpoena them for the information, but nobody really does that except lawyers. The next reason is you just are out of compliance. For instance, I see this all very often with SABs where they originally verified the location at a Regis or they basically a PO box, right? Mm-hmm. And again, it's been functioning for years until Google caught up with you. So there's that as well. So as far as mitigation, making sure that all of your information is really consistent. This means offline and online. So if the name of your business is Bob's Greatest plumbing, HVAC, and electrical company of Cincinnati, then you need to make sure this is also on any kind of citations that you have, your website, your business license, things like that. Make sure that it's just very, very consistent. Because again, Google can kind of see these offline and online signals. So, and if something doesn't match up, A, you can get reported, or B, they could just find out, and they're going to suspend you and make sure that you have to prove that you're real, basically, and that you're consistent.
And you say 22 days is the minimum amount of time you'll be offline for any suspension.
Currently, it's 22 days. Yeah, it was 15 days a week ago.
Fine. But is that just due to your backlog?
It's completely due to a backlog. I can't get into super detail on it at the moment, but yes, it's all about backlog.
Can you tell us whether the backlog is created by an increase in volume or a reduction in staff at their end?
It's a staffing issue.
Fine. Okay, so they've not tweaked anything that makes it more likely to be suspended. They just can't get through the normal number of suspensions with the same speed.
Yes.
Yeah. But the team that reviews the suspension, that's all right.
What's that?
You can say no comment, or
it's okay. There's certain ways I can answer some of these questions.
Do the team that reviews suspensions, are they in-house employed by Google, or do they have outsourced partners?
It's kind of a both, actually. It's primarily internal, though. Primarily internal.
Right. But currently they've got a staffing shortage. And is there any way to bypass that, fast track it, get preference?
No.
Genuinely, there are no other inside.
There are some tricks, which I'm not going to get into. But
come on.
Yeah. Sorry.
Is that because that's what you use, or because
you know how many reinstatements how you do a month? Yeah, but no, that's secret sauce that we've learned. But yeah, so no, really, but those levers, there's just like not even a ton of them. And Craig's right. You can, sometimes you can appeal. There's no appeal team, actually. But yeah, so for the most part, you have to wait. It sucks. It's horrible. I've got customers who they're screaming and crying, and one guy I was just talking to the other day is losing $10,000 a day, and I had to tell him that I'm sorry, you're going to be down for at least 22 days, and it was heartbreaking. It really was. It's horrible sometimes.
Yeah. In that scenario, do you just pour money into Google Ads or into kind of Google service ads if they're a relevant business?
Good question. So in this case, I mean, what I've recommended they do is they actually really increase their budget on their local service ads, even though the reviews were desynced from the location or being desynced from the location. Yeah, I definitely told them they need to do some local service ads. They need to invest a little bit more in local organic SEO. And yes, advertising, absolutely. So that way they don't have all their eggs in one basket.
The local SEO play is presumably longer term, but the Google service ad budget increase can have an impact much more immediately.
Oh yeah, instantly almost.
Yeah.
So if you can do LSA, you should be doing LSA now, because it can offset your loss quickly. Yeah,
that's good. That's really good insight. Thanks, Ben. Yeah. Right, we're entering the last sort of quarter of an hour, so I'm going to just work down through. I am skipping some questions because I feel like we've answered them. So a lot of the ones around when you've got similar locations in a metro, for example, we've touched on that. Can we use a unique call tracking number as a primary number on each listing and the main phone number as a second phone number without getting dinged for NAP inconsistency?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's a fine tactic to use tracking number and then the primary number secondary. Yep, I would.
I encourage that tactic, actually.
Yeah, I would second that. Question from Desi: does GBP reject hashtags?
No, but they don't do anything for you.
Where might you use a hashtag?
There's really only one place. Well, technically two. You could use it in posts, which I see a lot of people try. Again, right. It's not going to help you. They're not hyperlinked. It's not a social platform. I've seen in the description as well, and also wouldn't help you there either.
Fine. Okay, so you don't reject them, but there's no discernible benefit that you've seen in using them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I like this question. Focus again. Yeah, what's most important, citation or local link building?
Most important citation. Think about authority. I mean, so things like Yelp and the Better Business Bureau, LinkedIn, those are going to be really, I think, really good citations. From a local perspective, you're looking at, any kind of well-known local directory. And of course, anything like, a government site or an EDU type of site, again, these are usually have a little bit more authority behind them than, say, Bob's link directory.
Yeah. And yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? And I guess it depends also on your sort of speed and budget, because actually doing citation work can happen quite quickly on a relatively known sort of ring fence budget, whereas link building is actually a long-term strategy. It's kind of regular and incremental. It's not guaranteed what results you're going to get, but you need to be starting now, and you need to be doing it kind of consistently and kind of regularly. I also think citations is something you can solve. It's a challenge you can solve pretty quickly within a kind of known budget. So our opinion is not either or, is do both, but expect one to get done quite quickly, i.e. citations, and the second one to be a long-term play that you need to continually invest in to kind of stay ahead of competition, or at least ensure that you are kind of keeping up with them.
Exactly. And does BrightLocal differentiate between higher authority citations?
In terms of where we build citations?
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah.
We
look at kind of domain authority. We have our own kind of citation score. We look at as well.
Nice.
We also look at local, but look at sort of what's passing local authority as well as industry authority, as well as these big high domain sort of sites as well. So you can get all that data in our citation tracker and our citation builder tool.
Awesome.
Look at that for a plug. Okay. Okay, hang on. And more around having locations grouped very similarly. We've talked about checklists for Google My Business optimization and what the activities that you should be doing regularly. Question here: can I bulk update opening hours for hundreds of stores at once without any repercussions from Google? Are there limits on the updates I can make to other fields such as phone numbers? So I think this is about suspensions and which fields are more sensitive than others.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think there's a bit of unknown about that, isn't there?
Not really. Kind of. So the basics go something like this. You can update as many locations as you want. Again, if you have a bulk verified account, you're going to be a little bit more insulated, and you're going to have a little bit more success and less suspensions a little bit if you're updating your hours in bulk. Okay. Now let's get into suspensions. Very simply is if you are touching anything that is on the information section of GBP, you can suffer a suspension depending on your category specifically. So let's say you're a funeral home, probably not going to affect it as much unless, let's say, if you're a personal injury or HVAC company. It's called a duress category. But basically, if you're updating your name, category, address, phone number, website URLs, these are going to be your most sensitive updates. And updating them can cause a suspension. Updating them in rapid succession will cause a suspension 90% of the time, actually. So my advice is if you are going to be updating multiple fields, update the field, walk away, come back. Has it been approved? Great. Make the update again and make another update. If you really want to be safe, then make your updates at least 24 hours apart. So Google can see this as what's called a red flag.
Right, fine. So you think it's the rapidness and the frequency within a certain window of time that raises red flags with them?
Yeah, it's mainly because it was a spammer's technique when they were creating fake listings. Is they would cycle information in and out of fields very quickly, sometimes even through the API, to try and force verification of GBP profiles or get the PIN code, or whatever. So yeah, it's a protective measure.
Okay.
Gotta love the spammers. Ruin it for everybody.
Yep, making our lives very hard and difficult. Big frustrations. Okay. Uh,
Lots of LSA questions, all sorts of good questions come in here.
I mean, do you have any couple of yours standing out? You think that's a great question? Pick that one up.
Yeah, it's just a general question. If your hours in LSA are different from the ones in GBP, does that affect the performance of one or the other? LSA is never going to affect GBP. I'm just going to tell you that straight out the door. For LSA, if the hours are different, it's fine. It's okay because it's only going to affect your ad performance and when your ad is actually showing. Currently, I have to put that caveat in there.
Okay, so LSA doesn't impact GBP. Yeah, it won't have any negative consequences.
No, at all.
This is a good question from Laura, actually. And Laura, you've been fantastic today. So we've fired through some excellent questions. She's got a situation where she's got clients with multiple locations who've moved. Some of those locations are inside business offices, and there's no possible way to have outside signage, only inside signage. And Google won't take the inside signage. How do you get around
Interesting. So, I mean, Google will take inside signage. Absolutely. For suspensions, they 100% will. Depends on what your inside signage is, though. So, so basically, you've got two types of signage. One's going to be your directory, and then we got a lot of questions about reviews. We should let me talk about really quickly about reviews after this one. So basically, when you're indoors with your indoor signage, think of it like this. I'm an investigator, okay, a Google support rep. I'm trying to figure out whether you are a real business or not. So you need to prove this to me. And so basically the signage, and Regis, by the way, is horrible with this, is that they only allow you to have something on their little main board that's in their cafeteria. But when it actually gets to your office space, they won't allow you to put a plaque usually on the door. Most of them won't allow this. So GBP is going to instantly reject this because they need to see signage on your door, because it only makes sense. If you're there, people need to be able to find you. They don't look at the business model that Regis has as valid, meaning that somebody just comes to a desk and they lead you back to the door. That's just not, it's not scalable with the world. So, so basically, yes, they will absolutely take interior signage. I mean, I just had 10 reinstatements today. Every single one of them storefronts, every single one of them internal signage. So, and outdoor signage is pretty rare, to be frank about it. But if you're afraid that that is the situation, just get some vinyl signage on a glass door and you'll be fine.
Okay.
What I wanted to talk about with reviews here is this. I've just been watching the stream and people are asking about reviews, and there's a couple things that are going on in GBP right now that people need to know. Basically, there's two distinct things that are going on with the reviews. Well, technically three. So we have a situation where new locations are being kind of firewalled from getting reviews. The reviews are not showing up. They are showing up on the contributor's profile, but they're not showing up on the merchant's GBP. This is something that you can't do anything about. The only thing you can do about it is come to the community and let us know about it. It's a firewall. It's in place. We're trying to get them to reduce the time. The other two are similar with each other, but I've given them names. The name is a new review ghost and an old review ghost. Google's filters, again, are up, and they're fighting spam on a very regular basis. Again, they have these false positives. So the new review ghost, this is the most common. This is where somebody leaves you a review. They see it in their contributor area. You've been in business for over 6 months, and it's not showing up on your profile. There's only one thing you can do about this. Well, two things. First step is that you need to get a screenshot from your customer. Then you need to go ahead and contact support, see if they can retrieve it. If they can't retrieve it, grab your support number, grab your screenshot, come to the Google Business Profile community, open up a thread, and then we can go ahead and we can see if we can find those for you. We'll ask Google, and if they are in compliance, which compliance with Google, then they will restore them. The other one is called the old review ghost. Now, the old review ghost is a little bit more rare, but this is what happens when you say, again, you've been in business for a little while, and you had 100 reviews, you wake up in the morning and you have 60. So you've got 40 reviews that have just gone missing. So in that case, it's very, very difficult. You have to have a significant number of views missing, and I can't tell you what that number is. But in that case, again, reach out to support first. And secondly, then if that does not work, come to the Google Business Profile community, and we'll see if we can help you and escalate it from there. So anyway, those are the review issues that are going on right now. Super amounts of confusion, and yeah.
And that's a deliberate tweaking of their sort of algorithm sensitivity, is it?
You could look at it that way, absolutely.
Simplistically, so it's not a bug. It's just an unintended consequence of them being more stringent in how they look at reviews.
Google calls it they call it a feature.
Oh, right, okay, brilliant. So it's kind of here to stay, but you think you're trying to get them to dial it back so there's less false positives grabbed with
yeah, exactly. For what it's worth. Yes, exactly. Okay. I mean,
I think we've got time for a couple more questions, Ben, and then we'll thank you and we'll let you go. We'll let everyone get back to their busy day. So,
go for it.
Question at the top actually is one of the kind of seeded questions for us. And it's kind of again due to density of locations. Should the tactics I use for locations situated close together in big cities, let's say I've got 4 locations in Dallas, 3 in Houston, should the tactics I use for them differ to the tactics I use where we've got one location in one city just on its own? Should I change what I'm doing, change my approach based on the kind of physical location, proximity, etc., density of population, big cities, lots of locations, smaller cities, one location?
Yeah, I would say really quickly the answer is going to be no.
Yeah, just be consistent.
It's consistency. It totally is. I mean, yeah, each location kind of is different. It's going to rank different. It's a different entity, but as a whole, the same rules still apply.
Okay. And the next one that's on the list, there's another one around sort of on-site sort of setup for different locations. We have kind of covered that already. Let's find something that we haven't done. We've done that. What's happening with GBP posts being rejected without a reason? This is a bug known by Google. And by chance, they're working on a fix for it, and that comes from Valeria.
Okay. Well, Valeria, good question. Unfortunately, the answer to your question is this is not a bug. This is a feature. They recently updated their guidelines for this. So they say no blurry photos, no stock photos, no logos on images, no phone numbers, of course, no URLs. The big thing there is no blurry photos, no logos on images, no stock photos. Now, I will tell you from experience, I find stock photos work 90% of the time. However, if you want to play 100% by the rules, try to avoid them. But the other thing is that Google has what we call the nanny bot, and the nanny bot is for any content. And so the words in a post can absolutely cause them to be rejected. So what I suggest is I think Joy actually over at Sterling Sky has a good blog post about this where the words are cataloged, but you need to look at words from a global perspective and not from a local perspective. What I mean by that is a word in English might mean something completely different in the UK or vice versa. So you need to look at those from I think of like, for instance, bollocks will absolutely cause a post, I think, to fail. I believe so. And so, yeah, you need to kind of look at it from those. Yeah, I know, right? So you need to look at it from that lens as to what would Google do? I guess you could say.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. I've got probably 2 rapid fire questions for you. Is having a GBP website of any real value?
It depends. From an SEO perspective, at least for the GBP, no. From the perspective of will it act as a fully updating self-citation? Yes. I've seen clients pull in $60,000 jobs just because somebody found their DMB website. So I guess it's worth it in that case.
Interesting. Next question. Thank you. If we have a life answering service, which I imagine is an actual real human that's operating 24/7, should we show 24/7 on our GBP or just use our normal business hours?
Okay. This one is a confusing question because there's a lot of factors to do it. I'll lead off with that hours are the least leading cause of a suspension. Now, if you have yourself set 24 hours and somebody actually tries to show up at 2 o'clock in the morning and nobody is there, or 12 o'clock, whatever the case may be, they could very easily go ahead and redress you, as well as post up photos, on your GBP showing that you're actually not there at your stated given time. If you look at the guidelines state that your hours should show the hours of operation where somebody can actually visit your location, not your service. Now, the flip side of that is like on service-based businesses, 24 hours is very natural. But again, as long as somebody's picking up the phone, it's probably good. So there's a lot of different factors there. So without knowing some more details, it's kind of hard to answer your question.
Okay. And the final one, I think, is a sort of follow-on question. You talked about how to use co-working spaces. There are two questions that come in from Steve and Margarita.
Okay.
Just clarify what the best practice is for setting up use of a co-working space.
Okay.
That's our last question, and we'll end it after that.
No problem, and I'll make it very succinct. So the way you do it basically is and it works for storefront or SABs in the same way, is that you're going to need to get an executive office that you pay for, which is your space only. You will need to get signage. Now, this applies again whether it doesn't matter if you're a storefront, meaning people can come to you, or a service area based business, which means you go to people. The reason is because it's the only way Google can actually prove that you're actually there. So, if you're an SAB, they're going to ask you still, at least they should. They're going to ask you for the signage basically to show that you actually have an office there. It's so people don't game the system, really, is what it comes down to.
Okay, great. Let's leave it there. Ben, thank you very much for sharing your time and your wisdom with us. Much appreciated. You're always incredibly generous with that.
Pleasure.
Great questions coming through. I hope people have found it useful. I believe we answered the majority of the questions. There was a fair amount of kind of overlap and around sort of similar topics and sort of thoughts. So we'll leave it there. Everyone, thank you very much for checking in. Please join us on the next local search clinic. Please also check out Ben's series on doing local SEO at scale, which is on BrightLocal. And there's more to come from that front. And I will just say thank you very much. Have a wonderful day wherever you are, and hope to catch up with you very soon. All the best. Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Ben. Thanks a lot.
Bye.